Hey guys, Ej right here, and I am super excited to be recording this video because it's the accumulation of everything I have done on this channel up until this point. If you haven't read the title, this is my top albums of 2020 list. I have listened to well over 100 albums this year, and I have a bit different criteria from a lot of people. I don't do a set number of albums, and I have an honorable mention section and the main list. And before I really get into this video, first things first, I just want to thank everybody that has supported this channel up until this point and that has subscribed to this channel up until this point. It has really helped me keep on going forward, and I really look forward to making more videos and continuing on next year. But I want to go over the eligibility for albums to make it onto my list. So there is the main list, and then there's the honorable mentions section, and then there are the albums that just didn't make it. And I put together this very rough little diagram. I'm not sure how well you could read that. So pretty much, if you have a 7 or less, if an album received what I believe is a 7 or less, it is not eligible to make the list or the honorable mentions. If it is between a 7 and what I perceive to be a 7.5, it makes the honorable mentions list. And if it is higher than a 7.5, in my opinion, it makes the main list. With that being said, I want to get straight into this, and I want to cover the honorable mentions first. The albums that I think were higher than a 7, but didn't really quite make the cut. These are albums from Benny, Hey UX, The Weeknd, After Hours, The Network, Money Money 2020, We Told You So, Mac Miller, Circles, Fen Lily, Breach, Nicholas Jar, Tell Us, Bronson, Self-Titled, Eminem, Music to Be Murdered By, Grandson, Death of an Optimist, 9 Inch Nails, Ghost 6, Locusts, Tame Impala, The Slow Rush, Chubby and the Gang, Speed Kills, Trivium, What the Dead Men Say, NLE Choppa, Top Shotta, Poppy, Music to Scream To, and Ozzy Osbourne, Ordinary Man. Well, these albums didn't really make the cut for my main list, unfortunately. These are still albums that are worth checking out and are still good albums nonetheless. I do think that some of them have weakened on me since when I first heard them. Others have actually grown on me since I first heard them. But regardless, these are some of the albums that I did enjoy thoroughly, but I didn't get around, or I didn't personally think were deserved of being on the main list. Now that I have the honorable mentions out of the way, it's time to announce the 35 albums that were able to make my top albums of 2020 list. Starting at number 35, we have the BTS album, B. Even though B is not as ambitious of a project as their much bigger and more grand studio album which came out earlier this year, Map of the Soul 7, it is arguably one of the most introspective albums in their career, with a sound that has much more natural instrumentation and acoustic elements to it that really give it that more personal touch that a lot of their albums don't have because they are often focused on making pop hits. However, despite that, this album still includes the mega hit Dynamite. Coming in at number 34 is Bring Me the Horizon, Post-Human Survival Horror. I often wrote Bring Me the Horizon off as just another generic, not-so-good metalcore band, and to be fair, I still have those feelings for some of their earlier material. But on Post-Human Survival Horror, they continue to blend sounds of electronic music and industrial music into their metalcore sound, and the end result is some of the most intriguing and innovative metalcore music I have heard all year. Overall, Bring Me the Horizon has really reached new grounds on this album as well as some of their most recent releases, and I think if they keep on going this route, they can be one of the best metal bands of the 2020s. Coming in at number 33 is the Christian Lee Hutson album, Beginners. Beginners is one of those albums where it doesn't necessarily push the genre of folk in any new directions. It's still a pretty standard folk album. It is one of the most well-written and with some of the best acoustic material folk music I have heard all year. Produced by Phoebe Bridgers, the beautiful acoustic work and the brilliant writing makes this album one of my favorite folk albums to have been released all year. Coming in at 32 is from the band Phantom Planet, most known for having the theme song of the OC California. I've always appreciated much of Phantom Planet's work, and I think they often get glossed over. And on Devastator, their first album in over a decade, we see them modernize the sound that we've already come to know and love, and it's executed in a way which makes me want to come back to it time and time again. It is hard to compare it to my personal favorite of theirs, The Guest from 2002, but Phantom Planet has matured quite a bit since their last album, and this is probably their most mature and well-written album to date. Coming in at number 31 is the Humanist project Humanist, or self-titled. This is Rob Marshall's really out there project, a very abstract project, a very kind of indie, kind of alternative, even a bit of shoegaze project that features a wide array of vocalists that sing above some of the most interesting rock instrumentals I have heard all year. These vocalists include Depeche Mode's Dave Gahan to even Screaming Trees' Mark Lanegan. It's really hard to pinpoint the sound and the goal of this album, but it's very well put together in the most artistic way possible, and I have come back to the Humanist project time and time again, and I really hope Rob Marshall continues to go down this and continues to build off of this project. Coming in at number 30 is the new King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard album, KG. Despite this being their 5,000th studio album in less than a decade, King Gizzard continues to be in the forefront of the new psychedelic rock movement out there, for sure. While it is not that stylistically different from much of what King Gizzard has done up until this point, they continue to make some of the best psychedelic music, the psychedelic rock out there, and even though it does have that 60s throwback feel, there's just something uniquely King Gizzard about this album. Coming in at number 29 is the debut studio album from I Don't Know How But They Found Me, Razzmatazz. This is an album I was looking forward to quite a bit, and in the never-ending sea of alternative pop and rock bands that are just popping out time and time again with forgettable albums, I Don't Know How But They Found Me have managed to make and carve out a little sound for themselves, blending sounds from like The Killers to some disco influence to some alternative rock. I Don't Know How But They Found Me definitely has a very promising debut on Razzmatazz, and I strongly look forward to seeing where they go in the future. Coming in at 28 is the new Marilyn Manson album, We Are Chaos. Well, once again, like many of the other older artists on this list, it is hard to compare this album to some of his greatest works like Antichrist Superstar and Mechanical Animals, and especially considering Marilyn Manson has had a pretty bumpy career over the past 15 years. I mean, he continues to ride high after the release of The Pale Emperor and Heaven Upside Down, because We Are Chaos may be a more ballad-centric album, but some of these ballads are some of Marilyn Manson's most heartfelt and best songs in his entire career, such as Paint You With My Love. Overall, I really thought that he hit it out of the park on We Are Chaos. Coming in at number 27 might be a bit unexpected, but it is the Everglow EP. I don't even want to say the whole title. I'm just going to say -77, because it is a very big, weird number. But needless to say, this K-pop EP is just 4 songs, and this is really like one of the first major releases from this K-pop group. And if they can continue to move and make music this impactful this early on in their career, I think they could be one of the greatest K-pop groups of all time. I thought that it's a very enjoyable, very fun pop EP, and I definitely look forward to seeing where they go next. Coming in at 26 is the new Run the Jewels album, RTJ4. Given the tumultuous and just crazy year that 2020 has been, we were in need for a new Run the Jewels album. And while I wouldn't say this is as good as their magnum opus, Run the Jewels 2, you know, Killer Mike still is as vocal as ever about the political climate, and overall Run the Jewels put together a relatively solid album that fits nicely into their discography, and it is just nice to know that Run the Jewels is here to comfort us in these crazy times. Coming in at 25 is the new Strokes album, The New Abnormal. The long-awaited Strokes album comes after one of their most relatively disappointing albums, Come Down Machine. And once again, much like some of the other older bands on here, you know, I still believe that This Is It, or Is This It, is like probably their best album. The New Abnormal, it definitely sees the band, you know, bring more electronic elements, bring more synth elements in there, experiment a bit more, and yet keep that signature Strokes sound. Overall, The New Abnormal is undeniably the Strokes' best album in nearly 15 years, and it lands safely at 25 on this list. Coming in at 24 is the new album from singer-songwriter Rufus Wainwright, Unfollow the Rules. I feel like this album might just be his best since the Want 1 and Want 2 series that he put out. And it is his first album of original material since 2012's Out of the Game. And I think that Rufus really covers a whole bunch of subject matter, from the political climate we are living in to just aspects of getting older and living life. And vocally, Rufus is as strong, if not better, than he has ever been. Overall, it was a very beautifully composed singer-songwriter pop album, and I thought that it fits solidly into his career. Coming in at 23 is the new 9 Inch Nails ambient album, Ghosts 5 Together. I am so glad that Trent Reznor decided to continue this Ghosts project, which was back, I think, in 2008, 2009-ish, but he never really added on to it until this year. And with Ghosts 5 Together, it is some of the most spine-chilling ambient music I've heard Trent Reznor do, and he continues to be one of the best ambient artists out there. Even for an artist that's been doing it as long as he has, he still continues to impress me. Coming in at 22 is the new EOB Ed O'Brien album, Earth. Now, it's very easy to compare this album to Radiohead's albums, and even Ed O'Brien's contemporaries in the band, but to be fair, Earth is Ed O'Brien from Radiohead's standalone album right now, and it is a very unique piece of music that sounds nothing like what Radiohead has done, and he is not afraid to throw out some of the experimentation in return for some beautiful acoustic tracks and some really solid dance grooves. Overall, I think Ed O'Brien's project here is very promising, and I really look forward to seeing him do more solo stuff in the coming days. And coming in at 21 is the new Jello, Biafra and the Guantanamo School of Medicine album, Tea Party Revenge Porn. The Dead Kennedy's former frontman still is as powerful and as vocal as ever. His vocals sound as good as they ever have, and musically he is as woke as he has ever have been. I think that his satirical tone of the world we are living in is very well needed in the times when everybody seems to be a bit too serious. We need Jello Biafra to hit us with just a pure album of just pure punk energy with a nice satirical tone to it. Coming in at number 20 is the new Troye Sivan EP, In a Dream. This is his first release since his 2018 album, and I think it might just be his best project yet. Even though it is much more condensed than all of his previous projects, his sound is condensed into the best possible package yet. The lo-fi minimal production just adds more and more to the very accessible pop side of Troye Sivan. Tracks like Easy are some of the best pop tracks I've heard all year, and the production only adds to it. I think it is one of the most finely polished pop EPs I've heard all year, and I strongly look forward to seeing if he could follow up this EP with an even better studio album. Coming in at number 19 is an album I was eagerly waiting for, Juice WRLD Legends Never Die, and this is how a posthumous album should be put together. Unlike XXXTentacion's albums, which were disastrous after his death, Juice WRLD's team really put together one of the best posthumous albums I have heard all year. This sounds like the album Jared Higgins would have wanted, and honestly, it has some of his most heart-wrenching material on here, such as the just heartbreaking Righteous, which is one of the best songs in his career, and he wasn't even alive to experience it. Overall, I was very satisfied with the end result of Legends Never Die, and I really hope that they don't just milk his music till the day his family dies, because I really think that this was a really good goodbye. Unfortunately, I do think they are going to follow it up with new albums, and I am very cautiously looking forward to them. Coming in at number 18 is Bob Dylan's Rough and Rowdy Ways. Bob Dylan, after over half a century of writing and recording music, is still one of the most prolific songwriters out there. Once again, this is like his 39th or something album. It's hard to compare this to anything else he has done, but at the end of the day, Bob Dylan is just as vocal and is just as prolific as he once was. Musically, this is a very standard kind of bluesy, rocky album, but the beauty of it lies in his very conscious lyrics and his aging vocals. Overall, this is a very satisfying listen, and it is nice to hear Bob Dylan still actively making great music in 2020. Coming in at number 17 is the new Lady Gaga album, Chromatica. After revitalizing her career with the hit movie A Star Is Born and its subsequent major soundtrack, which made shockwaves, Lady Gaga has really scaled back and has really returned to some of her more dance pop roots in the best possible way ever. This may very well be her most cohesive album yet, and with some of her most impressive vocal performances too. I think that Lady Gaga really did make one of the best dance pop albums I have heard all year, and arguably her best album in her career. I think that it is just a very cohesive album, and she sounds excellent. Overall, not too much negative to say here. Coming in at 16 is the new Kid Cudi album, Man on the Moon 3, The Chosen. This is the third and final installment in Kid Cudi's Man on the Moon series. And if you go back to the first Man on the Moon album, I think that is one of the most influential albums that we see in hip-hop today. And I think Kid Cudi's Man on the Moon 3 is the perfect, third album in the series. I mean, you could even hear some of the influences from artists like Travis Scott, which is ironic because Travis Scott cites Kid Cudi as an influence. But he continues down that psychedelic, R&B and hip-hop sound, but really modernizes it to the point where it sounds fresh, it sounds new, and it doesn't sound like he's washing up old ideas that have been stale for years. Instead, Kid Cudi is as creatively adventurous as he has ever been, and he continues to be one of the most interesting artists to listen to. Coming in at 15 is unfortunately another posthumous album. This is, of course, Pop Smoke's Shoot for the Stars, Aim for the Moon. Much like Juice WRLD's album, this is how a posthumous album should be released. And to Pop Smoke's defense, he was around for most of the creation of this album. And this is the perfect display of Pop Smoke's abilities as not only a rapper, but a songwriter. His deep, dark, raspy vocals really made him stand out amongst the other rappers out there. And it's very unfortunate that this may very well be the only album we get from him. And yet very few rappers have the ability to play some of the most dark and just aggressive hip-hop songs right next to love songs right next to it. And overall, he really shined as a versatile songwriter, a versatile rapper, and overall this was an extremely promising debut album, and unfortunately there's not going to be any more. This album just proves how big of a loss Pop Smoke has been, not only to the hip-hop world, but to the music world in general, and I am just so confident in putting Pop Smoke, Shoot for the Stars, Aim for the Moon on this list. Coming in at number 14 is The Chats' debut full-length studio album, High Risk Behavior. On their debut album, The Chats are as energetic, as just silly, and just in-your-face as they have ever been. The satirical classic punk sound may not be anything new or revolutionary that hasn't been done before, but it is sometimes just so refreshing to hear a punk band just give it their all and not even care about their surroundings. They're reckless. They're in your face. And I think the Chats really managed to pull off one of the best and most true and honest punk albums I've heard all year. As much as I do like it when artists do have commentary on the political world, it is sometimes nice and refreshing to just hear an artist just, go for it. And that is exactly what the Chats do on High Risk Behavior, one of the most entertaining and satirical punk albums that have been released all year. Coming in at number 13 is the new Future Islands album, As Long As You Are. It's no surprise that Future Islands has been at the forefront of the synth-pop scene for quite a while now. They've been making some of the best synth-pop albums for quite some time now, and honestly, I think this might be my favorite in their entire discography. Songs like Thrill are the perfect example of why I like them so much. It has one of the best chord progressions, one of the most soothing and dreamy instrumentals that I've heard all year, and yet the vocals are so raspy and in-your-face and gritty, and yet they still portray so much deep and thoughtful emotion, and yet it fits the music perfectly, even though there's that sharp contrast between the gritty vocals and the dreamy instrumentals. And this is something that I think they execute better on As Long As You Are than any other album I've heard them do. Overall, I just love this album. He even sounds a little bit like Eric Burdon from The Animals, and I really think that they can continue to make some of the best synth-pop music out there. Coming in at number 12 is the new Ty Dolla $ign album featuring Ty Dolla $ign. The LA artist just seems to get better with each and every release. This sort of little R&B trap sounding album is his most cohesive, his most flowing album to date. The first leg of this album flows together flawlessly, and overall you get a nice versatility on here as well. Tracks such as Spicy featuring Post Malone are some of the best party tracks I have heard all year, whereas songs like Tyrone 2021 with Big Sean are some of the most pure and just good R&B tracks I've also heard all year. Overall, I think Ty Dolla $ign continues to prove that he is one of the most interesting voices in R&B and in hip-hop, and I think none of his releases display that better than featuring Ty Dolla $ign. Coming in at 11 is the new Idols album, Ultramano, and the highest-ranking punk album on this list. In my opinion, Ultramano is honestly Idols' best album in their entire career, their most focused album, and their most well-constructed album as well. musically, it is unarguably probably the tightest, most like just solid punk album I've heard in quite some time, even in terms of Idol's discography. The satirical, passionate, and even a bit controversial tone of many of these songs on this album really give this album a sound that is so unique to Idol's that very few bands even come close to sounding like it. Idols continue to spearhead the punk genre into the 2020s, and I could only hope that they continue to make music of this greatness into the next decade. And we have officially made it to the top 10, and rounding off the top 10 at number 10 is the new Don Toliver album, Heaven or Hell. It is very easy for many people to write off Don Toliver as a Travis Scott clone, as he does have a similar style of psychedelic trap that has taken the world by storm. However, I do think Don Toliver has carved out his own little niche, mainly due to his very impressive and very unique vocal performances. Some of the best vocal performances I have heard in hip-hop in quite some time. I think that his very falsettoed, auto-tuned vocals may sound in theory reminiscent to Young Thug. They are actually super unique, and some of the most unique vocals I have heard out there, period. And it's not even just the stylistic of the vocals and the instrumentals that make this album good. There are just simply some of the best hip-hop songs I've heard on here all year. Had Enough is one of the best ones I've heard all year, and Euphoria, featuring Travis Scott and Cash Page, is one of the most beautifully constructed and just beautiful, just that's the only way I could really describe it, hip-hop tracks I have heard all year. Needless to say, I think Heaven or Hell was an album that was overly overlooked by many critics and fans alike, and I think it safely lands on the top 10. Coming in at number 9 is the new Poppy album, I Disagree, and oh boy do I disagree with the original rating I gave this album. This was the first album I reviewed all year, and I gave it a 6 out of 10, and I honestly give it an 8 out of 10 now. This is an album that has grown on me a ton since I first heard it, and Poppy's seamless blend of metal elements with her kind of off-putting but pop-friendly sound is one of the best crossovers I've heard all year. And it's not even just the metal songs that make this album great. The more ballady Sick of the Sun is one of the best songs on here, arguably my favorite Poppy track to date. And in many ways, it's like the modern equivalent to Robert Plant's Big Log, another song that I love quite a bit. Overall, Poppy just surprised me with how cohesive an album that, in theory, shouldn't even worked out. You know, I Disagree is just the seamless blend of the off-putting and kind of very unique sound of Poppy's past albums, but adding some metal in there, and it turned out to be her best album yet. Coming in at number 8 is the much bigger, much more grandiose BTS album, Map of the Soul 7. On their most ambitious project yet, and I'm not sure if it's their longest, but it's pretty damn long. BTS shocked me with how good this album turned out. I often did write off BTS as just being a generic Korean boy band with not much talent. But on this album, they really showcased their vocal and rapping abilities, with songs like Boy With Love being some of their most successful and some of the best K-pop and just pop songs I have heard in all year. Songs like Ugh are honestly some of my favorite BTS tracks because they are just some of the most aggressive hip-hop songs I have heard, period. It is very, very easy to gloss over BTS and write them off, but I think there is some real magic to be had on Map of the Soul 7. And I think they continue to prove, especially on this album, that they are arguably one of the most talented groups to be coming out of Korea at the moment. Coming in at number 7 is the new Perfume Genius album, Set My Heart on Fire Immediately. It shouldn't be shocking to anybody that Perfume Genius can safely land on any of these year-end lists. He has continued to be pushing the art rock genre in the right direction for almost a decade now. Michael Hadris has been just an artistic powerhouse for quite some time, and this album is heavily influenced by choreographer Kate Wallich, which led him to make music that was much more about real-life people in real-life situations, which is a new change for him, and I think he pulled it off perfectly. Musically, there's a lot of diversity here, from the wall of distorted guitars on the track Describe to the bit of a funky groove on the Floor. Overall, Set My Heart on Fire Immediately is one of the most artistically pleasing albums I have heard all year, and I definitely look forward to seeing what Perfume Genius does in the future. And coming in at number 6 is from Lime Cordial, 14 Steps to a Better You. Sometimes what you need to get through rough times is just pure feel-good music. Now, that being said, there is substance here. This isn't just feel-good, substanceless music. No, this is actually relatively solid. Some of the best indie rock and indie pop I have heard all year, even if it is feel good and fun. Instrumentally, it's one of the most uplifting albums I have heard all year, and even vocally, while they cover a wide range of topics, it's just a genuinely good feeling album. And there isn't really too much else to say here, other than the fact that it is just some solid indie rock that puts you in a good mood, and it is well needed in this year. I really think Lime Cordial could really spearhead the indie rock movement in Australia and continue to be one of the most interesting artists I've been hearing out of that part of the world. And coming in at number 5, we are entering the big leagues here with Phoebe Bridgers' Punisher. Very few artists have been as creatively prolific as Phoebe Bridgers this year. Not only just on Punisher, she's been featured on the 1975 album. She was with Kid Cudi. Overall, Phoebe Bridgers is on an artistic high right now, and the very minimalist, lo-fi, and indie sound of Punisher perfectly describes her artistic abilities. And it has already taken the world by storm because there are certain big artists who seem to be influenced by her who also got Grammy nominations this year. But this album just feels like a nice summer night. It is an album that I've come back to time and time again. Phoebe is one of the best vocalists out there currently. It's one of the best produced albums out there currently. And quite frankly, you know, there really isn't too much negative to say here. These top few get a little hard to really rank. In many ways, Phoebe Bridgers fills the gap that was left from when Elliott Smith passed away, and she is in many ways like the modern Elliott Smith, but don't take that the wrong way. She is not just Elliott Smith, she is her own self, and this album, Punisher, is one of the most unique albums I've heard come out all year. And coming in at number 4 is some good friends of Phoebe, Bright Eyes, Down in the Weeds, Where the World Once Was. Bright Eyes is back, baby. After The People's Key, which came out in 2011, they took a pretty long hiatus. I actually didn't think they were ever going to get back together. And to be fair, The People's Key, to me, would have been a relatively fine closing album, because I thought The People's Key was a relatively solid album, unlike many other people. But they shocked me with just how good Down in the Weeds, Where the World Once Was really is. Down in the Weeds covers all the bases and is arguably their most musically ambitious project yet, covering a wide range of bases, from that usual Bright Eyes sound that we've all come to know and love, to a fair amount of more synth and electronic-oriented tracks that sound reminiscent of some of the band's work on Digital Ash and A Digital Urn, another album I am quite fond of. Connor Oberst also proves that he is still as great of a songwriter as he once was quite a while ago. And to be fair, there are just many things that wouldn't have fit on any other Bright Eyes albums, but work perfectly on Down in the Weeds. The track Mariana Trench is one of their best singles to date, and yet it would have felt out of place on any other of their releases, but it fits perfectly here. The bagpipe arrangements on Persona Non Grata caught me off guard, and they would have felt out of place on many of their previous albums. But on Down in the Weeds, it fits perfectly onto this ambitious project. Connor and the gang have proven that they are still as great as they once were quite some time ago, and they continue to make some of the best indie music out there, and I just really hope that they continue to make new albums. Coming in at number 3 is the Grimes album, Miss Anthropocene. On her first album in almost half a decade, Grimes hit us with arguably her most cohesive and her best album yet. Now, that's obviously up to debate for many people, but I think this is her most well-rounded project without a doubt. Every track on this album tells a unique, different musical story, from the epic opening track, So Heavy I Fell to the Earth, to the kind of futuristic country pop banger, Delete Forever. She covers all the bases here and does it all in her own unique, kind of off-putting futuristic sounding style. Production-wise, this is one of the best produced albums I've heard all year, with one of the best electronic productions I've heard all year as well. And yet, even in the midst of all the craziness that is Miss Anthropocene, she still manages to fit some of her most heart-wrenching and best vocal performances into this album, such as the track New Gods, which blows me away as being one of her best songs to date. It's just, the vocal performance on that track is to die for. Miss Anthropocene is Grimes' atmospheric, artsy, abstract, emotional, and captivating magnum opus that has just solidified her status as being one of the greatest artists of not only the past 10 years, but hopefully the 2020s. I really look forward to seeing where Grimes goes in the future, because this album has just set new highs for her career, and it makes me wonder, will she even be able to top it? Who knows? Coming in at number 2 is an album that was massively, massively, massively glossed over. That is, of course, the Plural One album, I Don't Feel Well. Josh Klinghoffer's side project Plural One has somehow turned out better than anything the Red Hot Chili Peppers have done over the past 20 years. It is one of the most intriguing art rock albums I have heard come out in a long time. It is just so cohesive, and it's just so good. Between his soaring falsetto vocals to the swooping synthesizers, the excellently processed drums, to the very, very touching piano ballads, this album is all the creative energy inside of Klinghoffer's mind put to paper, or I should say to vinyl. It is condensed to just 10 songs, and yet it is one of the most interesting 10-track albums I've heard in forever. Maybe since Violator. Who knows? It's just that good. I feel like I definitely just look forward to seeing where Josh Klinghoffer is able to move this project forward, because he has really hit it out of the park with this album and even his last album, which came out last year. And it is some of the best art rock I've heard all year. I don't have much else to say, because it is just so well put together. I love this thing. And coming in at number 1 shouldn't even be a surprise to anybody. I don't even need to look at notes. Did you get the pun? Yes, the 1975 Notes on a Conditional Form. How many bands could put out an album that is so good, like A Brief Inquiry into Online Relationships, and yet manage to make their most ambitious, most groundbreaking, and their best album just 2 years later? I mean, maybe besides Radiohead, there isn't too many of them. The 1975's Notes on a Conditional Form may have polarized critics because it is one of... They cover all the bases here, a bunch of different genres, a bunch of different sounds, and yet they managed to execute it, in my opinion, all perfectly. You know, this is one of the few albums throughout all time that I actually give a 10 out of 10 to, and I have no shame in saying that. You know, this is like all of Matty Healy's chaotic energy put into one album. It may be long, it may be very diversely sparse with a bunch of different genres, but it is one of the most artistic and just great albums I've heard, not only from 1975, but from any artist of all time. This is an album I have come to time and time and time again, literally trying to look for major flaws in it, and I always come back empty-handed. You know, this is an album where they cover, you know, a post-hardcore track like People, acoustic tracks like Jesus Christ, 2005, God Bless America. They even have some sort of Britpop anthems like Me and You Together song, some abstract electronic songs like Yeah I Know, to some electronic dance songs like Having No Head. And of course they even have their standard 1975 sounding tracks like If You're Too Shy, Let Me Know. And yet all of these tracks are so precisely and perfectly constructed that I have almost no complaints whatsoever. I have come back to this album time and time and time again, and it just grows on me more and more and more and more, with finding new and new details with each listen. Overall, the 1975 really hit it out of the park with Notes on a Conditional Form. It's an album that most artists dream of creating, but very few ever actually achieve. Notes on a Conditional Form safely lands at number 1 on this list, and could very well be on a top of my decade list if no other album seems to top it. This is already one of my favorite albums of all time, and I congratulate the 1975 for making an album so impressively good and just so pleasing. With that being said, that is the end of my 2020 list. Those are the top 35 albums, plus my honorable mentions, and it is just so exciting that I finally have made this video, because I have been waiting to make this all year, and I've listened to over 100 albums, and I am just, it's so relieving it's relieving that this year is coming to an end, and it's just great that I was able to keep this channel going this whole year, and I look forward to keeping it going for the next few years. And thank you guys for almost getting me to 200 subscribers. I'm sure by the time this is up, I might already be there. It means a lot to me. It keeps me going. And with that being said, you know, yeah, I'm going to link my blogger post that I put together a blogger with this whole list in more detail. I'm going to put that in the description. And with that being said, that's it for now. Goodbye. I might take a little break for Christmas, and I'll probably be back next year or by the end of this year. That being said, goodbye. It's been an interesting year, and that is it. Congratulations to the 1975.